Today we're talking about episode 9 and 10 of Berlin Alexanderplatz. And in this in the beginning of episode 9, or in episode 9, our protagonist Franz Bieberkopf um, falls back into pimping and this relationship with Mitza. He also starts to get into politics in a strange way and starts to explore politics in his own unique way. And yeah, he's kind of dealing with the situation he's in and trying to make a kind of normal life out of it, even though it's totally grotesque and weird. And we're getting more of a sense of the environment that he's in, the political environment and the economic environment that he's in, how politics affects that, and his kind of ingesting of this political world and trying to make sense of it, and trying to make sense of where he fits into this society now, and how his identity now as a cripple, and what he can do to survive. And there seems to be this longing for normality on the part of everybody, of all the different characters are kind of trying to make a normal life in this utterly grotesque environment that they're involved in, and in a strange way trying to make a family life in a environment where a nuclear family is totally impossible to have. And I thought that what came to mind for me was that Franz Bieberkopf is kind of starts to begin to play a father role, and I started to see this thing rising up in him, this kind of fatherliness. But really, the overall condition of these episodes just kind of shouts to me the longing for a kind of naturalness and humanity and normality of a normal human family life and friend life, in the middle of this very mechanical world that they're in, and very kind of it's kind of an atheistic, like the whole bringing communism into it, but also bringing capitalism into it, and how the end point of those two things is really the same. Kind of came to me that, especially in the last scene of the 10th episode, when they're Mitza tells Franz that she's met a man who wants to pay for her to have an apartment, and just kind of wants to take care of her and have her be his mistress. And I really started to think about social life in Soviet Russia during that time, and how they were totally anti-family. There was no recognition of natural law, really, and that women were kind of like the property of everybody. But this is also, like, in the same way a commissar or a party member could come to your house and say, this is my wife now, or this is my mistress now, and you can't do anything about it. In the same way, in capitalism, in the extreme of capitalism, the same thing is happening to France, where this very rich man is coming and saying, like, to survive, you have to let me take your woman as my mistress. And I thought that kind of played into this whole political world that he's falling into, and all the contradictions that he's seeing within that political world. And it's funny, in the first episode, he goes to a meeting with Willie, And
Yeah.
Willie takes him to a meeting, and it's a very, like, you can't really pin down who these guys are or what this guy is. It's kind of like a weird syndicalist, anarchist
Hmm.
kind of, and he's criticizing the communists and the socialists and the capitalists, and you can't really. It's kind of just like boilerplate, like you're a worker, the state wants to
Yes.
exploit
Yes.
you kind of crap,
The
that.
parliamentary system is against us.
Right, yeah. And
Hmm.
but the whole contradiction in that of humanity's not is made up of so much more than just being a worker, and taking
Yes.
your
Yes.
identity is so much more than being a worker. And so there's this giant contradiction in that, where you're kind of imprisoning yourself in this worker identity. um and Franz recognizes that, and they have this long conversation with the guy that's attending the meeting. And it's funny
Hmm.
because he and Willie are having this long conversation with this guy, and Franz is kind of telling him the very real contradictions in what he's talking about, because I think
Right.
there's kind of like a an anarchist. Basically, they're kind of giving an anarchist exposition there, I think, where they're saying like no
Hmm.
system and no organization,
Right.
and all that. And but at the end, the guy says we need to create militant organizations, and Franz is like, what? Like, you just like made this whole speech about not doing that. And so, Franz, in his very natural way, in his very, like, innocent, just pure identity, begins to see the contradictions in this, and reacts against it, um, by telling him that, well, there's no reason for me not to be a criminal, um,
Hmm.
and gives his whole little exposition of his lifestyle, which has all these contradictions in it too, where he's saying, I'm not exploiting anybody, but he is exploiting somebody.
Hmm.
And there's a few other contradictions there, but I think that in that conversation, the environment that they're imprisoned in, all the choices of what direction you're going to take, are kind of exposed in this episode, in this Weimar Germany extreme poverty thing. Like, what direction are you going to take? Are you going to be a socialist? Are you going to be a communist? Are you going to
Hmm.
to be are you going to be a criminal? Are you going to be on the black
Hmm.
market? And all of these things are exploitative. And Yeah, it really made me think a lot, and think a lot about what comes out of that, and kind of Hitler's whole trip about, like, we're not going to have these conflicts anymore. We're going to do away with
Hmm.
unions. We're going to do away with all these different political parties, and we're going to have,
Hmm.
like, class cooperation instead of class warfare. And the guys, when he's talking to the guy in the bar, and he's talking to Max in the bar, he's talking to Max the bartender, and Max says, "There's
Hmm.
always
Right.
been poor people and rich people." And I think that says a lot, because there is always going to be poor people and rich people. Like, that's,
Yep.
like, there's going to be people that have different karma. Everybody has different karma, so
Hmm.
there's going to be different lives. And that's really, like, one of the giant contradictions of communism is like, making a standardizing humanity into this,
Yes. Yes.
like, everybody's the same. Everybody needs to
Yes.
be a worker, and it's all very gray and boring and mechanical, and you know kind of looking at humanity as kind of just this biological accident, that there's no spirituality behind or anything. But
Hmm. Hmm.
and then it's funny because Franz, at the end of this going to the meeting and then having this conversation with this guy, he ends up at Ava and Herbert's house, and he's getting shit faced, and he starts to repeat everything verbatim that he's heard at this
Yes.
meeting, and he repeats it all verbatim. But then he starts going into this whole thing about Earth and animals, and he starts to get really confused because he's starting to confuse natural law with the communist kind of platform, and seeing the contradictions in it, and he just kind of goes in two different directions, and he ends up kind of just like spacing out, and everybody's like, oh, okay, Franz, like what,
I think that's when he says, I think you can talk for and against something at the same time.
right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so he is aware that something's really wrong here.
yeah,
You should talk for and against something at the same time. What's going on?
yeah, yeah. But then Willie says that's life, isn't it? Like
Yes, yes.
these contradictions are just a part of life,
And then Franz ends up saying, life will take care of itself.
yeah, yeah, yeah. These paradoxes are kind of inherent in life itself, and that's the point. Yeah,
Yes, and that's where he's at. Life will take care of itself. It's as though he's jumped into the river, and he's like the current is going to take him wherever it takes him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what did you think?
Well, I agree with your summary. I think one of the new things in these two chapters is that the women come forward and are making decisions. There's that long scene with Eva and Metzi, and Metzi goes kind of crazy. She is all over Eva, and Eva's saying, "Are you a dyke?" And she says, "I'm not a dyke. I just like you very much." And Eva says, and Metzi says, "Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could have Franz's baby, and if I could raise the baby?" The conversation goes on for a lot longer than that, but that's the basic thing of it. And they make a decision among themselves to do this, or at least Metzi thinks they have. And Franz gets all heartbroken. What are you doing all this for? And I'm a pimp, and you're going with this man. There's something behind this. And he's right that there's something behind it, but he's wrong about what it is. And finally, Metzi says, Ava wants to have your baby, and I want that to happen. And he's going, what? It's really come out of left field, not only to Franz, but to the entire story. You're getting this very unusual but deeply feminine female input into this story here, and Metzi seems quite. At first they're estranged, and Ava tells him to go back to Metzi, and he brings flowers. He sees her in the street, and he doesn't know whether to do it. And then she's very happy to see him, and then he's sensing something's going on, and then finally she tells him about Ava wants to have your baby. I can't have your baby. She doesn't specify why, but Ava wants to have your baby, and we'll raise your baby. And she's really deliriously happy, accent on delirious, about this. Well, Franz is getting involved in all these things you just summarized very well, and then the rich man comes, and Franz is devastated. The performance is amazing. All these people are incredible performers, but Franz, he's had his arm cut off, and now you see him being emasculated before your eyes, where nothing else could break him. But here she's going to go off with him, and to your point about capitalism, her final line in episode 10
Yeah.
is, "It's my job. I have to do it."
Yep. Yeah.
Which is the justification for so much bullshit in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there she is. I mean, the guy who finally presses the button that sends the nuclear rockets flying is going to say, "It's my job. I have to do it."
Yeah.
But and it leaves. And so episode 11, I think it was 11, 10, 11, I can't remember. No, 10. Ends with Mitzi going out the door, saying that. And Franz is devastated. He is emasculated. He is now classified as a cripple. And Reinhold has been telling him, oh, cripples should be killed. Oh, this should be killed. Willie, who's younger than they are, Mitzi and Eva don't want Franz hanging out with Willie. Mitzi is giving him, don't get involved in politics. Politics is crazy. Don't get involved with politics. And there she is, seemingly content with being a prostitute. I mean, she gives every indication of it. And it's my job. I have to do it. This is my work. And she goes off with this rich guy who has said to Franz, well, as you know, your wife is very charming.
Yeah.
And so you have these two threads going to each other, through each other, like meshing spiral staircases, or like diagrams of DNA. And one is all this politics and undirection, one direction, another direction, another direction, France. And the other is these women who are at the bottom of the scale. They are the prostitutes. They are the ones making money. And they don't seem to see any other possibility, and you can't blame them in that chaotic society. And the other thing is, and I don't know whether I trust this or not, they don't seem bothered by it. They've accepted their place. None of the men have accepted theirs. And then it ends with the second episode ends with Mitzi walking out the door, and Franz is left there with one arm and emasculated, and we do not know what will happen to him next. I certainly don't. And every episode opens with this dim, almost black and white montage of various scenes that pass too quickly to see over the sight and sound of a huge locomotive racing toward wherever it's going. So they are both on this locomotive and in the path of this locomotive, because every once in a while the narration comes in. There's a reaper called Death, and this reaper is coming, and there is a reaper called Death, and this reaper is coming. In only a few years, the cities are going to be leveled, and this build-up. It's very interesting to me that this was written in the 30s, because at first I had the impression it was written in the 40s. I don't know how I got that. And that this is written as all this is going on. And as it's an expression of a society in the present, which is very hard to do. And so you see, sometimes as I go through this, I have these two conflicting thoughts. One is that over and over and over again, well, quick impulse. Over and over and over again, these situations are circular. They don't really change anything until they do, and then that becomes circular. And we keep on watching these behaviors that seem, to me at least, very sincere. The people are behaving with authenticity insofar as their reactions and their environment is concerned. And at the same time, as you go through situation after situation, I sometimes think, why does it take you 14 hours to do this? You could have done it in 7 or 3. But at the same time, I keep going, just fascinated. I watch a scene and go, oh my God, you two have been on the floor for about 10 minutes of a straight shot.
Yeah.
Where you as a viewer are encapsulated with them. You've been watching this one take. You don't even know it's one take because most people aren't going to think technically about film. You've been watching this one take of these two people on the floor, and it's gone on for longer than film scenes go on, even in John Cassavetes' movies.
Yeah.
And you become enveloped in it. You become enveloped in what the French call the mise en scene. I mean, what you mentioned about the color, which is so rich, and the tones of brown, orange-ish tones of all the interiors, and how rarely it actually goes out into the street. It certainly has to do with budget, but when they go out into the street, it looks quite real. And I begin to think that what is being expressed is the impossibility of really understanding anything. Of the impossibility of these people understanding themselves, of the impossibility of the viewer understanding the behavior. The behavior is very paradoxical. The people are doing things for several reasons at once, that you can't pin it down to psychology, and you can't pin it down to the Marxist sense of the necessities of history, and you can't pin it down to the capitalist sense of fulfill everybody's wishes. And it goes, in a sense, beyond meaning. It's a presentation of experience. And there isn't a limit to the inner and outer sense of experience. It's very hard to define. The events unfold, and I, for one, am transfixed by them. I want to see what happens next, and I've been watching this thing for 10 hours, and I still want to see what happens next. Where are these people going? What's going to happen? Historically, you and I are kind of above it all in the sense of whatever we think about the history that's about to follow, we know what its basic outlines are. We know what's coming at these people, that locomotive. We know their world is totally about to change beyond any kind of power they have to change it. And again, I step out of it and go, this is a city of 4 million people. And, the trains are still running. There's still, it takes a system of food production and transportation that involves many, many people and involves keeping a certain kind of order to feed a city of 4 million people, to supply it with clothing, to keep the power on. So all of those systems are in place, and yet the society is falling apart.
Well, you can look at a city like Bangkok in the same way. I mean, it's a totally
Yes.
disgusting place, but it still operates, right? I mean,
Yes, exactly.
yeah,
It takes a certain amount of order for the disorder to happen.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, you know, Otherwise everybody just becomes dogs. And 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 so all of this is counterbalanced in my mind as I experience this work. And I wonder, as I watch and as I go over my notes, I wonder at the possibility or impossibility of meaning. And Franz, this goes back to Franz, who really is the everyman of the 20th century. The more I look at this, Franz is looking for meaning. He tries to fit everything into some kind of meaning. He goes back and looks at the prison where we first saw him. As we first saw him being released from the prison. And he looks at it and he says, maybe inside is the same as outside. Maybe everywhere's a prison. And again and again, over these 2 hours and over the 2 hours the previous, we watch the murder of Ida, I think her name was, the prostitute where he was a pimp, and she mocked him, and he finally murdered her. And the landlady comes in and witnesses the end of it. There's no question about what happened. Over and over, we see this flashback. I mean, over the last 4 episodes, we've seen it at more and more length. It seems to be the prism through which Franz is viewing everything. Because the Fassbinder, the filmmaker, is insisting we remember this is what happened. We remember this is the turning point in Franz Biberkoff's life. The end of Ida's life is the turning point of his life. And this is the thing he's trying to deal with. He committed this act, this sin. And he doesn't want that. But as the title of one of the early episodes is, if something like, if I don't want to die, how am I going to live? I'm deciding to live, how am I going to live? And Franz is the only one asking that question. Everybody else is reacting to stimuli. Not that Franz doesn't react to stimuli, we all do. But Franz is the one asking that question of, how am I to live? And then, now with the arm off, he says, what can I do with be a pimp? I'm a cripple. And Reinhold was saying, well, we should get rid of all cripples. And Franz is admitting he's a pimp. Well, I'm not so bad. What else can I do? And at the same time, he's ashamed of it. And then when he is in that room, in their home, their apartment, and which I relate to because I've always lived in apartments. I still live in apartments. I like apartments. And this rich man comes in, and with this show of politeness, he's going to walk off with Mitzi for 3 days, he says, in their own apartment, their own rendezvous that he's rented. Franz has to be a pimp to eat. And this guy can rent a whole apartment just for seeing Mitzi every few days. And And he's faced with the consequence of everything, really, his entire life. And he's devastated. And we don't know where he'll go from here. And so we want to see yet another episode of Alexanderplatz so that we can see how does he pick himself off the floor now. Which essentially is, for me, the question that the film continually comes back to, and does that with the rerun of the murder. How did he pick up himself off the floor now? And so it makes a point you brought out a couple of times ago. It frames and highlights the importance of one life, Francis' life, Franz Biberkoff's life, in the midst of all this turmoil. Fassbinder, the director, knows that the audience has a keen sense, especially his German audience, of what's to follow. A keen sense of the history that is roaring like a locomotive down upon these people. And how little their choices matter in the larger sense. And yet, at the same time, the very existence of the piece is saying, this man matters. Watch this man. He matters. These two brave, pathetic whores, Eva and Mitzi, they matter. And realize that they matter. The fact that you're watching means that they matter. And then, as you said a few times back, there is not exactly an acceptance of one's own responsibility for one's life, but a recognition that no matter what's going on all around you, you're still you. You still have to live. And what are you basing that on? And it's all right to say, I'm not basing it on a damn thing. I'm just doing it. And it's also all right to say, I just have a sense that life is important. That my life is as important as anybody else's, and their life is as important as mine. Or all the different things you can say. Because Franz Biberkoff becomes a nexus for one philosopher whose name I can't remember calls the stream of life. And the stream of life passes through him as he is carried on that stream. I think it's brilliant. I go over my notes and go, even places where I'm bewildered, and I go, okay, these scenes are circular. They keep coming to the same place and yet not. It's a different place on the circle. It's a different level of altitude where the circle happens. And you are propelled forward. There's always some new energy coming in. There's political energy coming in. There's these women deciding to have Franz's baby. There's Eva scheming to get Mitzi back to France. There's and sometimes Mitzi or really Eva too will end the scene by saying, Eva will say to Franz, well, I have to go meet Mitzi. And Mitzi will say to Franz, well, I have to go meet Eva. And that seems sufficient for her walking out the door and ending the scene. So I find all these things mysterious in a very real way, not the kind of mystery that Hitchcock presents, but in this sense of what am I trying to say?
A
In
religious
this sense
mystery.
of, say,
A religious mystery.
yes, yes, a mystic mystery,
Mystery.
a
Yeah.
religious mystery.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well, I
and
think,
these people, have I missed something? Or did these people not mention God at all,
yeah. Well,
or religion, or spirit, or anything like that?
there's a whole, I think that there's just something covering this entire thing that never really needs to be said, but it gets close to being said when that voice just keeps intoning
Yes.
the Old Testament. Like in this episode, when it's showing the scene of him killing Ida, the voice is giving its own version of is it the Abraham and Isaac story?
Yes, yes, Abraham and Isaac.
Um, and I think that what you said about the circularity of it, I think that Alfred Doblin, that's his whole intention. And if you can imagine the entire thing as one big circle, and Franz has been descending over the past 7 episodes, and now he's kind of like at the bottom, but trying to dig his way back up the circle, trying to ascend again. But in that big circle, on on the circumference of that circle, there's a bunch of circles connected to each other, where he goes up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. So it's like circles within circles, like Ezekiel,
Yes.
circles within circles. And that's kind of what humanity does over
Yeah.
our evolution and existence, and and I think that order comes up in these episodes over and over again. What is order? And Ava kind of she when he's giving this, he's reciting all this communist spiel, and she says, no, we need order. We need to be able to cross the street, and we need to be protected.
Right.
So we know, like, we need this. And I think that in a very or transcendental sense, France represents order to these people, and that's why they love him. But it's a very
Huh.
pure, natural order. It's the order of God, because he's so just himself. He's so genuine, and
Yes.
his heart is like on his sleeve all the time, and he's always just
Yes.
stating whatever is coming to mind. But it's all natural, and it's like, despite all the horrible shit he's going through, he's just like a pure expression of spirit in
Yes.
this like turmoil of matter, like he's in this crazy way.
That's a wonderful way to see it.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's a wonderful way to see it.
And I really, there's a part in the start of episode 9. So there's this amazing scene where he goes and sees Mitzi on the street, and he's got the flowers, and there's just this whole freaking, this scene full of emotional turmoil that comes across, and in just tiny expressions and motions, and the music is going back and forth from like kind of urgency to mellowness, and just that scene is really amazing. And he goes and like kicks the wall, and then goes, and he's like, oh my God, I'm gonna become a pimp again or whatever. But at the end of that scene, he says, now I can go and do what this thing that I need to do, right? And I had to watch the episode again, because I totally like missed that the first time I watched it. But he says, now I can go do this thing that I need to do. So he goes on his way to go do this thing that he needs to do, but before he goes and does it, he walks through that Whore of Babylon street again, right?
And which is the only direct biblical thing we see, or Babylon.
Yeah, yeah. And he asked the guy to give him his little Whore of Babylon spiel again,
Yes.
and the guy's like, you've like moved on from this, and it doesn't have any effect on you. Are you sure you want to hear it? And he's like, yeah, I want to hear this again. So the guy's like, okay, I'll tell you my little thing again, but then Franz gives his little story. He's like, listen to my little story, and it's about this fly that's in the bottom of a flower pot and it's covered in dirt, and he's like, the fly extends its little black head and shakes the dirt off of itself and like crawls forward, and he's really stating like, yeah, like I'm in the depths of this
Yes.
squalor, but and I might be a black fly, but I'm going to march forward and shake the dirt off myself and keep going. And then he starts saying left, right, and he starts marching out of that place, right? But then the other just like amazing scene in this episode is he goes to Reinhold's pad, right? And
Yes.
which is just totally bizarre, right? And Reinhold's like, what?
Yes.
What are you doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here? Did you come to kill me?
Yeah. And Franz is like, why wouldn't I come here? Like he's all like matter of fact about the whole thing. And then there's just this whole bizarre thing where, Reinhold wants to see his arm or wants to see his shoulder.
Right.
And it's
He
just
wants to see his stump.
yeah. And I really I had to think a lot about what this whole scene meant and why it was there, and I kind of thought to myself that Reinhold is Franz Bieberkopf, but it's like his shadow self, and that's why he keeps being attracted to him.
Oh, that's good. Yes. Reinhold is his shadow self.
Because it's like everything that Franz is trying to get away from, and it's like his lower self, like his animal self that just has no peccadillos about anything. He's got no scruples about anything, and will always do whatever is selfish, and
And he pushes Franz from the truck,
yeah.
and that's how Franz loses his arm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that whole thing, like you could look at Reinhold as not existing as a real character, and that whole scene of the robbery where, I mean, you think like Franz must have known that they were going to go rob someplace, right? But he acts like he's innocent of that, but Reinhold, he tries to go away, and Reinhold comes and drags him back towards the robbery and everything, and then it's because of Reinhold that he falls out of the car and loses his arm.
Yes.
And so that was kind of my idea, because this has been kind of a mystery of why was Franz attracted to Reinhold in the first place, and why does he keep coming back to Reinhold, and I think that, I think like Reinhold represents something about Franz, like a dark side of Franz Bieberkopf, because
that's very, very good.
He is such a...
That pulls a lot of strings together.
Yeah, because I think one of the things about the repeating of the Ida incident is that he's a really different guy in that.
Mm-hmm.
In that he's like a more... he's more of a confident guy, but not in a... I don't know. It's like he has more... He's like a pimp on purpose then.
Yes.
Where now he's like a pimp out of circumstance. And I just get the sense in those scenes that they're portraying a very different man in that.
Yes.
And I think he's kind of like Reinhold kind of represents that part of himself that's because nobody can be as innocent as Franz Bieberkopf,
Right.
and nobody can be that happy-go-lucky and not have like this darkness in them at the same time.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so I don't know. That was kind of my idea of what Reinhold
I
represents.
think it's very good. That brings a lot of threads, as I said, brings a lot of elements together. It makes it more of an artistic whole. Yes. No, Reinhold is Franz's shadow. His dark impulses, his weakness. Yeah. So he goes to Reinhold after the whole Babylon thing. Yeah.
And he confronts it, and
Mm-hmm.
then while he's there, he begins to. And another thing about that you might have noticed about in the totality of these episodes is there's always these cages, um, and like caged birds, caged monkeys,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's also when they in a scene they'll show the people behind uh like barred windows too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Yes.
they'll pull back and like in the scene at Reinhold's house when he's leaning up against the window and he's talking, and then the camera pulls back and it shows that the camera is actually behind a paned window that looks like jail cell bars, so
Right.
it's
Right.
like there's always this theme of imprisonment there, but that scene with Reinhold is really quite exceptional, especially when he asks him to show his arm, and
Right.
you really get a sense of the horror of what losing an arm looks like, and just like up close, and they keep showing this, they must have found some guy that was missing an arm, and then Reinhold starts to do this whole thing of trying to fill his sleeve with underwear or something and make it look
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Where it's almost slapstick. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
yes, it is almost slapstick. Oh, that's funny.
yeah. What did you think about that scene?
Well, you know, that's the first scene after after uh, uh, after Franz tells the story of the fly.
Right.
So he goes to Reinhold. He's the fly coming out from under the dirt, and he goes and confronts this this his shadow, embodied in this person who has caused him this pain, and to whom he's attracted. Suddenly, he goes to Reinhold. That's very true because I couldn't figure it out right then. Why are you going there? It's a very Franz-like thing to do. I didn't question it in terms of the art, but I couldn't figure it out. But I think you've got it. And then he has to look at his wound.
Yeah.
Reinhold
Yeah.
makes him look at the stump that we have not seen yet as viewers, and makes us look at the stump. No, I think you're dead on about that.
Yeah. I think it's the reason that the Ida scene is repeated like that is he's just continually trying to come to terms with what he's done and
Yes,
the horror of
I
it.
agree.
And yeah, and over this episode or these two episodes, people keep saying to him, this is going to happen again, like you're on the track of this happening again. Max says it to him, and
Mm-hmm.
Herbert says it to him, and yeah, it he's it's strange. Yeah, I can't really figure out where he's at right now. Yeah.
Yes, I have. I've never seen this before. I have no idea where it's going.
Yeah, I can't remember what exactly. I kind of have an idea of what happens in the end, but I don't remember the details of what goes on in the next couple of episodes. But but there's that one part in the a couple of episodes back where the voice says that it's going to end in tragedy, but there's no reason to despair.
Yes, he says something like, after this endless, terrible tale, I will say what I'm saying now. There is no need to despair.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then he repeats it. There's no need to despair.
Yeah. That's very,
And,
very true.
So I'm fascinated. Do we have 3 more episodes?
Okay. Let's see. The next one. So there's 11, 12, 13, 14. So
Okay.
4 more episodes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we can do it again. We probably could do it again, but
We probably could. But we should do the Marx Brothers first.
yeah, something light. Okay, was there anything else you wanted to say about these episodes?
No. No. I really like what you're saying, and between us, we are managing to understand something.
Yeah.